Hey, what's going on? This is Dr. J. Duncan here with Minds Unlimited and Minds Unlimited Media, bringing you another perspective of the week. This week, we're actually going to be doing a book review / book suggestion for you guys. So, I know that a lot of you that are connected with us on the Minds Unlimited website know about the men's book club that I host once a month meetings, but blogs throughout the month, talking about different discussions related to the men and related to reading, so combining both of those things. But in today's book suggestion / book review, we're going to be talking about a book that is both beneficial for men and for women to kind of digest. So stay tuned, relax, get your mind open for some new perspective. So yes, today we are doing the book review, and without further ado, let's get into the title of the book, shall we? So the book that we were looking at this week / this month was The Boy Crisis. I will leave the link and information and stuff down below so that you can find the book, whether you listen to it on Audible or if you buy the physical book like I do, so that I can go through, highlight, make notes and things of that nature. So this book right here, we use in our men's book club, which we hold once a month, and we have blog posts and discussions throughout the month. So if you want to get connected with something like that, it is a virtual community, so you can join from anywhere. Just give me an email or give me some contact and I can get you connected. But we review this book because we got to discussion about what does it mean to be a man, right? What are some of the things that we go through or some of the things that we neglect to deal with? What are some of the perceptions that are put on us by other men or by the community? And what this book kind of helped us do was realize that we can talk about masculinity from the lens of a positive standpoint. We hear a lot about how masculinity is usually associated with a lot of negatives, like, oh, too aggressive or too, the list goes on. But it doesn't necessarily give us a lot of hope or room for what does it mean to transition into being a man, from a boy to a man, or even what does that even mean, right? So this book helped us break that down. Now, I'm not going to go into details about chapter 1 was about and chapter 2 was about. I really would like you to read it for yourselves. But what I do want to do is break down some principles that jumped out that we discussed in the men's group to kind of help you and spark maybe some inspiration to read the book, but then also give you some helpers and some pointers for men and women to kind of dive in so we can start to understand one another, okay? So one of the first areas that it talked about was defining what manhood was, of course. But it talks about the void or the lack thereof purpose in men's life. A lot of men are judged nowadays based off of what you do and not who you are. Right, so that laid in heavy. That was one of the first things that popped off in the conversation, because we in this group we have a lot of fathers, we have a lot of brothers, we have a lot of men that work in different roles. We have stay-at-home working men, we have going out and bread-winning men, with the quotation marks, right? And at the end of the day, all the men agreed that this notion of if what they do sometimes is put as more important and more of their identity than who they are. Now, I understand some people are like, well, you know, what you do kind of describes who you are. In essence, but when you can't do that thing anymore, do you cease to exist? That's one of the topics that this brings up. It talks about that void in purpose, void in education, void in mental health, and then also talks about violence and things as far as how men are portrayed in the community. One of the conversations that sparked off of this book was the imagery of what masculinity was, right? If you think of masculinity, even the word, when you say it, you think of a person with muscles. You think of Arnold Schwarzenegger, you think of the Terminator, or you think of Rocky or Apollo Creed. You think of these strong men that were like the pinnacle of what masculinity was, right? Sometimes it goes over people's head that a lot of those characters, Apollo Creed and for Rocky, for instance, were both like strong characters, but they also had strong principles, if you will. Neither one of them would cheat to beat the other person. They would reach the challenge. They may fall down. They lose sometimes, but a lot of times they lose and they'll get up and they'll fight to the death. So I'm not going to spoil the rest of the Rocky movie. But one of the things I do want to do is to kind of highlight some of those things to encourage you to get this book or to break it down. So now I'm going to go in and talk about the different sections of the book, if you will, and give kind of an overview and then give you my opinion of how this can help both guys and gals. All right. So part number 1 talked about, is there even a crisis? Do we even think that this thing really exists? So some of the topics were mental health. I'm a mental health therapist by trade. A lot of people that I see are dealing with stress, anxiety, depression. These diagnoses, these symptoms do not exclude male versus female, but oftentimes how we treat them does. You see, there are levels of pressure that are assumed once a boy is reaching that rite of passage, that puberty period. They're no longer cute, or there's no longer a level of tolerance for their development. There is you now have reached a stage to where you need to start producing and doing things like a man should, right? And unfortunately, that doesn't always fit every single child. So in the realm of mental health, we see a lot of adults really with a lot of unsettled childhood issues because of what it meant for them to grow up. Their rite of passage did not necessarily fit who they were. It just fit who they needed to be for that time period to survive. And survival instincts are cool, but survival instincts usually are not custom to thrival instincts. You know what I'm saying? And I won't go too deep into that, but that was one of the things that came up. The next was physical health. So if you think about it in terms of masculinity, the book goes in and talks about how bulkier and bigger was better, and that was the only pinnacle. You couldn't be too skinny and not have enough weight, and then you couldn't have too much weight. So because you had to fit this middle ground, and we already know not everyone's body type can get you to that middle ground, because that is the pinnacle in which you are deemed attractive, or the pinnacle in which you are deemed healthy in the eyes of the media, in the eyes of what we present that manhood looks like. A lot of men feel like they don't belong. Like, oh, my body structure automatically excludes me from being a man. It excludes me from being popular. It excludes me from being accepted. And sometimes that crisis, it deals, so that impacts that mental health, that impacts that imagery of self. Now, we know that ladies go through this as well. And I don't want to say that it's not important. But with this conversation, I'm really talking to the things that a man goes through, so boys to manhood, and how it does still impact them as well. Men are not excluded from these body imagery discussions. We also go into economics about how a lot of majority of men that don't have higher education are getting what's called the deaf jobs. So working jobs that are more at risk to their health in order to provide for a family. So the only times that they can get, us as men can get a salary that provides for our family without education is to put our lives at risk, right? You think of truck drivers we get a lot of money by driving the trucks to ABC, but you sacrifice the time that you put in with your family. Construction workers, there always a need for construction and building. However, the risk of getting hurt on a job is a lot higher. Coal miners, right? Not saying that these are jobs where you can get rich off of necessarily, but all these jobs are mainly, populated by males, and all those jobs are highly risk. You know what I mean? They all have a high level of risk. In the field of mental health, there isn't too many therapists. In fact, if you put culture on it, talk about black male therapists. In my area, I know one. Me. Right? I think I've heard of some other, and in our community, a lot of people pass by, we know each other, but there isn't that many in this field. So that leads us to believe that for some reason, certain fields that are deemed safe aren't deemed manly or aren't acceptable. And this book goes into that and talks about those different ideas. So we got that mental health, we got the physical health, we got the economic goes into that, and then the education, of course. We're dealing with degrees, like what degree do you even go for? Like, is it acceptable for a man that's trying to be masculine to say, you know what, I want an art degree? or I want to go into education. The education is highly respected. It isn't like it's preached to our young men that, hey, you want to be a teacher when you grow up? It's, hey, do you want to go into, armed forces or, be a policeman? All good, right? But a lot of times they're only sold by the image of the masculinity. They're not just sold by morals, principles necessarily. The armor has morals and principles, but it isn't what's being sold, if that makes any sense. So that's a majority of the book. That was just one part of it. The next part went into why the boy crisis isn't your fault. So we didn't create this issue necessarily. This generation, probably generations before us, this is something that has been happening for as long as there's been people. There's been an identity crisis of what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? How do we interact with each other? And over periods of time, that notion has changed. This we're not the same society that we were even 10 years ago. The idea of who's the breadwinner, the idea of how families unite, even the structure of what a biological or a family looks like is dramatically different. So understanding that within one generation there's differences, imagine over 2 or 3. So your grandparents and then, let's say, your children don't see the world the same. They are not living in the same world. So what does that mean for rite of passage? That means that if you're going through a traditional rite of passage from your culture or from wherever you live, it might not even be the right one for your kids. They might be going through a different world. So keeping that into focus. Next, the book goes into the void. So like I said, that purpose void, that the identity voids, all of that. It breaks it all the way down. And I don't want to go super, super deep. The book is a good book. It goes in. It gets into even some medical things. It talks about different diagnoses. But overall, this book has inspired a lot of men and women, so we'll get to this portion, to look at masculinity and look at the things that our brothers are going through so that we can understand where the relief can come from and where the support can go. So from a man's perspective, we don't do a lot of reflection on where we got our ideas from, on who we are and what we want to be, and on the impact that the society around us has on our day-to-day decisions. We don't do enough reflection. I suggest that when you read this book, you read it with open eyes to kind of get a glimpse at where we can reflect more. The second part is, a lot of ladies have chose to read this book as well, because a lot of them were like, I had no idea that you guys go through some of the things that you go through. And it's off a very positive conversation. A lot of ladies are saying like, yeah, we can be empathetic to 1, 2, and 3 because we go through, we just had no idea. And now that you mentioned it, we're all perpetuating a lot of the negatives in this, both men and women, and then it is keeping us from being a cohesive community. So I suggest that ladies out there, that you also pick up the book or listen to the book to get a gist of what's going on, to get a gist of how we can support one another. And of course, that means that guys can look at different topics to make sure that we're abreast on information to provide this tranquility. You know what I mean? Within this struggle, reading this book, some people may be like, oh, there's so many crises that, there's no way to equal these things out to be 50-50, to be equal for everyone. I suggest looking at this book and trying to get a sense of tranquility, trying to get a sense of understanding of where you fit at in the boy crisis, where is your mindset, and to be able to start conversation. The good thing about this book is it doesn't stop with you. You read it not to just get educated yourself, but to say, oh my God, I can think about this differently. I didn't even know that I'm an expert in this area. Now you can build some confidence to go talk to someone else to help them, because you may see them in this book. You might read it the first time and not really see yourself and see another boy that's going through something. All right? I'm the type of person that also reads the beginning of the book before the book even starts, and it lays down a super good story about, if you ask fathers what would they would like to have first, a boy or girl, and a surprisingly number of fathers get excited about the idea of having a boy, but is scared about raising one. Happy about having a girl and excited about raising one. So I leave that one to you in the comment section below. for the fathers or for the fathers in the future fathers or whatnot, leave a comment. If you were to have a choice of what child you would have first, what would it be? If you would have a choice of what child you would raise, what would it be? Of course, a lot of people would say both. This isn't to start a fight, but this is to start dialogue and a conversation. If you read the book, share below some of your thoughts, some of your things you've learned from it. If there's other books that you would suggest, put it in the comment section below. This is the first book review that I'm doing in this manner, but I wanted to put it out there to get your thoughts on it. Also, if you got other books that you want me to review, let me know. All right. So long and behold, end of the day, The Boy Crisis. I'll leave the description below. It is a book that is meant to open your mind on the topic of masculinity. All right. Now, my name is Dr. J. Duncan. This has been a perspective of the week on the book review of The Boy Crisis. I hope that it inspires you to go out and think more. I hope it inspires you to read more. And I hope it inspires some dialogue and conversation. All right. So please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that bell notification to be put on alert when we're dropping more and more videos. All right. So, as always, the smallest change in perspective can change a life. This is Dr. J. Duncan.